Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Building a Strong Foundation for a Healthy Family Summit. My name is Andrea Milioti. I'm your host for today, and today's guest is Michelle Gomes, and we're going to be speaking about You Can Do It, how parents can be at the forefront of their kids' reading. And a little bit about Michelle. She is a loving mom, a registered nurse, children's book author, and an advocate for closing the reading gap on, for children. She is an author of Orsa and the Three Brothers, which is a retelling of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, which is a book, a workbook, and a space venture. Reading and writing were always one of Michelle's favorite childhood pastimes, and she dreamed of one day that she would create her own magazine for which she would be a contributing writer. In 2019, she got inspired to write because she recognized a need for children's books that her children and other African American children could set themselves in and really like relate to that. She hopes that her books inspire children and develop the love of reading and learning. So welcome, Michelle.
Hi,
Anything
Andrea.
you would like to add to that about your passion?
I it's just that I'm really passionate about it. It's really important to me. It's something dear to me. And yes, I'm just, continue to write and push forward and get the books in the hands of the kids and families who need them. And that's important to me.
Okay, you have three kids of your own, right?
I do. My oldest is 19. My youngest is 4. He just turned 4, and my daughter is 5.
Oh, all right, so nice little
Yes.
age gap there.
Yes.
That's good. You have the older ones, so you got instant babysitter,
Yes, and he
which
loves
is good.
them. Yes,
Yeah, which is good. That's a big help. That's
yes, it
definitely a big
is.
help. Why is it so important that parents be proactive in teaching their kids foundational reading skills?
Um, to me, it's extremely important because I feel like when they go to school, they get books that are sometimes not for them. They get the books that are part of the quote unquote curriculum, right? And so there's been a lot of research done on what really gets kids reading and interested in reading. And one of the things that is needed is actually parent involvement. So I was actually reading on a study once that, why, how some children in inner cities or from poorer families or from poverty, why some succeed at reading and some don't. Because it's this assumption that it's, by class. But what they found was that kids who live in poverty, while they may not sometimes have access to books, even when they did, whatever book they did have access to, parent involvement is what created the reader. So it didn't matter what space or what school you went to. It mattered about the parent, like how involved the parent was, how much reading they did with their child, whether they were interested in the reading, whether they taught them how to enjoy reading.
Mhm.
I also think in the home is where kids learn to see it not as something they have to do, but something you can want to do, something
Mhm.
that's more enjoyable. When they go to school, it's seen that like we have to do this, right? At
Mhm.
home, parents can curb that and make it something enjoyable so the kid can just want to pick it up and expose them to other things other than what the school may be exposing them to. Um, so the
Makes
interest
so
and
much sense.
motivation and the love for it starts with at home, in the
Yeah,
environment at home. Yeah.
it's the forefront of everything. I think everything always starts with the way parents. I think parents are the first teachers, the first and
Yes.
real teachers of their kids.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah, I think that,
absolutely.
yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, why isn't it enough? So why isn't it enough? Basically, we talk about, just to get a little bit deeper, enough for a parent to just say, okay, you know what? I don't have time. Okay. And it's like,
Mhm.
can I just leave this to my teachers and my students to give them the best education? It's kind of a two-part question, because also how maybe them how can parents get over that? I don't have enough time.
Yes. And I being a single parent, right, of 3 kids, and we just discussed, work and all these other
Mhm.
responsibilities we have.
I relate
And
to that too.
yes. And now we have COVID in the mix. So sometimes people are sick. Sometimes your kids are sick, right? And how do
Mhm.
we navigate that? And one of the things I do is 2 things I do. I make it where it's something we can do on the go. So for instance, sometimes we're in the car. Sometimes I'll have them bring something that may not be a whole book. It could just be something that's a picture with a page, or some sentences. We can discuss the pictures. They can maybe look at the words we've been exposed to. We do a lot of that. Some other things that I do when they're spending time with other people, like their nana or cousins, they do something with them as well. So that's a good way to get someone else to help you, right? This reading thing, I think sometimes the exhaustion and feeling like we don't have time is because we don't realize that we don't have to be the only ones outside of the school and outside of our homes, doing it. We have help.
Right.
Whether it's a friend or someone who reads, who loves, who could possibly pass it on to your kid and take that burden off of you. The other thing that I realize is that what parents don't seem to get sometimes
Mhm.
is that you don't have to read with your kid every day. It does not have to be for 30 minutes. It could be as simple as 5 minutes with a picture book or maybe a quick chapter, or I love short stories. Pick a
Really?
poem, get a magazine that they're interested in that has pictures, or my high school nephews, they're reading books that have some of the graphics
Mhm.
and the characters talking. I'm drawing a blank on what those are called, but it doesn't have to
Oh,
be
like
today. They
are
have like
they like books that
anime.
like motion book like
I forget what they're called, but they almost remind me of anime, and some of them are
like
anime.
okay.
Yep, and the older kids are
I
really
think I know
into
what you're
those.
talking about. I can't think of what you call it either. I think I know. Go
Yep.
ahead.
So I think that's where the time comes in.
Right.
We have this misconception that that quality is associated with, the quantity of something. And that's not
Mhm.
necessarily true.
That's true.
Getting like three
Absolutely.
days a weekend, in a way that you can get it in that works for you and your kid, that's the goal.
It's
And
not the quantity, it's that quality. And you
yes,
can get that quality in as simple as 5 minutes.
yes, you can do something and just keep the exposure up, be consistent, whatever you do pick. But I think that's what I do. That's what I would tell parents to
Really?
do. Don't feel like you need to sit down. It doesn't have to be this super structured. Don't wear yourself out. Make yourself comfortable, your kid comfortable. Get something you both or they're interested in, where they're at, and get
Yeah.
get a couple minutes in, you know?
Exactly. I think so many parents, the thing is, the reason why they don't do it is because they get so overwhelmed. They
Yes.
think that they got to do everything. They're
Mhm.
working and they possibly are being like I was a single mom too. And it's like they don't have that time. Where are they going to fit out? And they get stressed, they get overwhelmed and they get frustrated and they
Yes.
just, therefore, they don't do it. So
Yes.
just to help them understand that you don't need a lot of time.
Yes. Yes.
That's really, really helpful.
Hmm.
And one of the final question would be, how did this become such a big like mission to you? Like in your as a parent, as an author, how did this happen for you?
Um, for me, I just leaned on the fact that as an adult, I still do a lot of reading. And
Mhm.
reading for me as a child, it was more than just a hobby. Looking back at the time, I didn't realize it, but at the time, reading, it was a hobby, but it was also a way for me to cope. I used
Mhm.
reading as coping. When I was going through things as a kid, I would pick up a book to enjoy
Right,
it, but it
right,
took me someplace and it just felt good, you know?
really.
And yes. And then when I got older, I started noticing with my son in school his lack of interest in reading. And I was like, oh my goodness, how can I help? Because I want him to be able to experience reading the way that I experience reading. And that's where it started. Trying to get my son to understand the things that I just explained to you. And I was someone who grew up reading, when he was a baby, like you, reading to him.
Mhm.
But I found the school involvement is where it shifted. So he enjoyed reading with me, but when he got to school, it became this chore. He wasn't really interested in the books. And I actually had a teacher one time tell me, you know, Miss, get books that you think your son would read, that are more current, that are more engaging. She's like, I have talked to my school about the books that they asked me to teach reading from. And I would tell you that if I had it my way, I would not have them in my classroom. And I was so stunned. There are so many teachers being
Really?
forced. Oh, yes, being forced to use
Really?
text in books that they don't even think are fitting for the age group and the grades, but they're being told by the school districts that this is what your curriculum is, these are books, and this is what we have, and this is what you will use. And
Really?
yes, and I was so shocked. Yeah, I appreciated her honesty.
Wait,
It was the first time that I really realized this is between the way my son was feeling while reading in school and why it made a connection for me.
wait.
You know, even the teachers wouldn't even be using these books, you know?
Really?
Yes.
Really? That's so interesting. That actually brings something in listening to that. And I wasn't going to even ask, this just came into my head. Something that I did for my kids when they were little. What do you think about, you ever hear of like the summer, like reading, what is it, camps? And sometimes libraries do that, reading groups in the summer, helping them find. What do you think about that
I love
as
it.
to enhancement? Yeah.
I love it. I haven't, he didn't do a reading camp. I did see some of the programs. What I did do in the summers, that was the other thing. Reading was all year round in my home. It wasn't just for school.
Exactly.
So we did do
That's the goal.
library together. Bookstore, I'm big on bookstores just because I grew up with a grandparent who used to always take us to the bookstore. Like that was one of our things actually
I
was,
love the bookstore.
yes, the trip to the bookstore.
I love
So we
that.
did a lot of that. If there was one thing I think that is underrated that people actually don't think too much about that still goes on is storytellers in your state. So there's storyteller groups, storyteller associations, and they put
Mhm.
on events, and you can bring your kids and they can not so much
We
from
used,
a book, but they're verbally telling a story.
we
And oh
used to
my
do that.
goodness.
I did that with my kids. I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful and it's fun. It's like a fun thing to do. And
Mm-hmm.
like my local library used to do that all the time, like story
Yes.
times. And we used to just go to story time and they used to love that. And that's why I said
Yes.
they were so interested in that. Like, it's like, and
Yes.
I think that's a great way to just get that to instill them, it's fun, it's fun. And
Yes.
sometimes it maybe they can get creative and tell their own story,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Sometimes kids are like that, they hear these different things and they kind of like tell their own story,
Yeah.
letting them get creative, which is
Yes.
awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Michelle. Been so helpful. So how can somebody wants to find you? How could they find you? And how could they get any of your books that you wrote? Especially that book about that's the retelling of
Yes.
Goldilocks. That's
Mhm.
interesting. If you could just like kind of share that a little bit, how
So
you would.
that one, what I did was I actually made Goldilocks the bear, a bear, right? And I had the main characters have be African American boys. And one of the reasons being is because we have such a shortage of books
Mhm.
featuring African American protagonists and also of male capacity, right? So I said, what if instead of, someone intruding in their home, she's intruding in theirs? And how can kids navigate, the problem that led up to her being into their home? So it has a lesson,
Interesting.
yes, about, what we should do as far as home safety.
Right.
Um, and the characters look like, I had them dressed and look and behave, and kids that are relatable to kids and today's.
So instead of Goldilocks being that girl going into the bears, it's the bear.
Yeah, yes.
It's
So
like the opposite.
yes. And so we did that. And yeah, it's really enjoyable. What I did do, make sure I did for parents is the workbook that goes with it
Mhm.
is so that way if anyone's homeschooling, they can use it for homeschooling. It
Awesome.
meets the literacy criteria, meets the it's for grades K through 3. So the workbook is divided into the chapters for the literacy standards for school and for the state. And then the book has a lot of repetition. It uses Dolce and Fry words, the vocab list. So a lot of words are words the kids are seeing in school and learning at those grades. So it reinforces those vocab words that they would see in school.
Awesome.
And it has a little bit of humor in it, and it's a fun story. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely sounds great. How can people get that?
It's on my website, Levels, Levels, the number 2, learning, learning.com. And
Awesome.
then,
Perfect. And I will share that as well in
yep,
the
and they
email
can
with
go
that.
to Amazon and look them up, or look me up and they'll come up as well.
That sounds great. I love it. I love that because
So,
parents really need this. There's so much great value and just little tips. And I think the biggest tip that, they should realize is they can find the time. They don't need a
yes,
lot of it. They don't
yes,
need a lot of it, just whatever works for them.
yes,
What works for their schedule that they could just throw in a couple of minutes here and very, very helpful. Because I think
that's the
more
key.
parents need to know that they are at the forefront of their
They are,
child reading, learning, writing, everything.
they are.
So thank
Yes.
you. This
You're
has been so
welcome.
good. And I thank you for giving me the time today.
You're welcome, Andrea. You're welcome.
Okay.